Captain Lyra Cole stood in the command center of the Stellar Hawk, staring out at the endless black void of space. The stars were distant, cold pinpricks of light, silent witnesses to the chaos unfolding across the galaxy. The Imperium was on the brink of collapse. Factions warred for control of the remaining habitable planets. Alien species sought dominion over the remnants of humanity, and the once glorious alliance had fractured into countless bickering factions. And in the heart of it all, Lyra was a soldier, a leader. But more than that, she was the only hope left. "Captain Cole, you've received new orders." A soft voice broke through her thoughts. It was Lieutenant Ari, the comms officer, his voice polite but insistent. Lyra turned, finding Ari standing with a data tablet in hand, his expression unreadable. "New orders?" she asked, her voice steady, though her pulse quickened. Ari handed her the tablet, and as she scanned the briefing, her eyes widened. "Activate the beacon?" she repeated. "You're serious." "Yes, ma'am. The Imperium has located the last functioning beacon of the Ancients. It's on Pyrus 4, hidden deep within the ruins of their capital city. They believe it may hold the key to uniting the fractured galaxy." Lyra shook her head, disbelief creeping into her voice. "The beacon's power was used once to create the divide we now see. It destroyed the Ancients and left the galaxy fractured. How can they expect us to activate it again? After all this time?" Ari shifted uneasily. "They believe it's humanity's only chance. If we can reawaken the beacon's power, it may restore communication, restore hope. The Imperium is willing to risk everything on this." Lyra felt the weight of the decision settle on her shoulders. Activating the beacon was a gamble. It could either unite the galaxy or plunge it into an even deeper chaos. The stakes were unimaginable. She looked out the viewport, where the vast expanse of space seemed to mock her uncertainty. But she knew this. There was no turning back now. Not for her. Not for humanity. "Prepare the crew," she said, her voice firm. "We're heading to Pyrus 4. If the beacon holds the key to humanity's survival, then we'll unlock it, no matter the cost." Lyra stood on the bridge of the Stellar Hawk as it broke through the atmosphere of Pyrus 4, the planet below covered in ancient ruins, remnants of a once great civilization. Her mission was clear, but every instinct screamed at her that this was more than just another assignment. Pyrus 4 was an ancient world, one that had seen the rise and fall of entire civilizations. The beacon had been dormant for centuries, its power a distant memory. But Lyra had heard the stories, the myths, of what the ancients had created, a power capable of reshaping reality itself. And she couldn't help but wonder, was the beacon truly a solution, or was it just another weapon waiting to be misused? "Captain," Ari's voice broke through her thoughts. "We're in orbit. The city's coordinates have been locked in. We're ready to begin the descent." Lyra nodded, her eyes scanning the radar screen. "Initiate landing. Stay sharp, everyone. We're not the only ones interested in this beacon." Ari looked at her, concern flashing across his face. "You think someone else is already on the planet?" Lyra met his gaze, her expression hardening. "I know someone is." As the Stellar Hawk descended through the atmosphere of Pyrus 4, Lyra felt the tension in the air thickening. There was something about the planet, the ruins, the stillness, that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. The planet felt like a tomb. "Captain, we're in position," Ari called. "Commencing landing sequence." The ship's engines hummed as the landing gears extended, lowering them onto the ancient subcracked ground. The dust swirled around the ship as they touched down softly, the first step onto the surface of Pyrus 4. Lyra looked out of the viewport once more, her mind still racing with the implications of what they were about to do. This was it, the mission that would determine the future of humanity. But deep down, a part of her wasn't sure if they were walking into salvation or doom. "Prepare the team," Lyra ordered, stepping into the command hallway. "We make contact with the beacon. Stay vigilant. We don't know what we're walking into." Ari nodded. "Yes, ma'am." The crew began to gather, moving with purpose. Lyra's heart beat faster as she gathered her own gear, armor, tools, the weapons she hoped they wouldn't need. But she knew better than anyone. In the galaxy, peace was an illusion. It was always only a matter of time before conflict resurfaced. And this mission, this beacon, might be the spark that set everything ablaze. As the doors of the Stellar Hawk opened, Lyra stepped out into the ruins of Pyrus 4. The wind howled through the broken city, stirring the remnants of shattered statues and debris. Once, this place had been the heart of the Ancients' empire, a thriving hub of knowledge and power. Now it was just another forgotten world. Her boots crunched against the cracked earth as she made her way toward the coordinates of the beacon. The city had long since fallen into ruin, but there were still signs of life. Broken holographic billboards, shattered structures that had once been bustling with activity. Something was watching them. Lyra's instincts screamed. They weren't alone. "Keep your eyes open," she ordered, her voice low but commanding. "We're not the only ones who want the beacon." Her team moved cautiously, eyes scanning the shadows, hands near their weapons. Lyra felt a sudden shift in the air. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up again. They were being followed. Subscribe now to see what happens next in the quest for the last hope of humanity. Will they activate the beacon, or has the power of the ancients been lost forever? The ruins of Pyrrhus IV stretched out before them, broken and haunting in their silence. The wind whipped through the shattered remnants of what had once been a thriving city, sending echoes of long-forgotten footsteps through the empty streets. Lyra led the way, her eyes scanning every shadow, every flicker of movement. The ruins felt alive, as though the planet itself was holding its breath. "Captain, this place feels wrong," Lieutenant Ari said softly, his voice filled with unease. "It's like the air here is thick with something we don't understand." Lyra glanced over her shoulder, her gaze hardening. "Keep your focus, Lieutenant. This is just the beginning. The beacon is somewhere here, and we're going to find it." A strange energy pulsed through the air, an unnatural hum that seemed to come from deep within the planet. Lyra could feel it deep in her bones, a sensation that tugged at her, made her want to turn back. But there was no turning back. She had come too far, and humanity's last hope was somewhere ahead. As they moved deeper into the ruined city, the architecture of the ancients loomed over them, alien and majestic. The city was built from materials unlike anything Lyra had ever seen. Smooth, crystalline structures that shimmered faintly even in the dim light. The walls were etched with intricate symbols, and strange markings adorned the broken roads, remnants of a long-lost civilization. The farther they ventured, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air grew heavier, and the feeling of being watched intensified. Lyra couldn't shake the sense that the planet itself was alive, its decaying heart still beating, just beneath the surface. "We're close," Lyra muttered to herself, her hand tightening around her blaster. "We have to be close." Hours passed as they navigated the labyrinth of ruins. The team moved cautiously, every sound amplified in the stillness. The deeper they went, the more unsettled they became. It wasn't just the oppressive atmosphere of the ancient city. It was something more, an unnatural presence, something that didn't belong. "There it is," Ari said suddenly, his voice tinged with awe. "The beacon." They stood at the entrance of a vast underground chamber, its walls lined with the same strange crystalline material that made up the city's structure. The air in the chamber was thick with energy, crackling and vibrating in a way that made Lyra's hair stand on end. In the center of the room, illuminated by the soft glow of the crystals, was the beacon. It stood tall and imposing, a massive structure of glowing metal and light. It hummed with an almost sentient energy, its presence overwhelming and powerful. "It's beautiful," Ari whispered. Lyra took a step forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She had come so far, faced so much to reach this moment. The beacon had the power to unite the galaxy, to bring hope back to the fractured world. But would it work? Could it be activated again? "What do we do now?" asked Sergeant Mendez, his voice tight with uncertainty. "How do we activate it?" Lyra stepped closer, examining the beacon with intense focus. There were no obvious controls, no buttons or levers. The entire structure seemed to pulse with energy, as if waiting for something. "We need to sync with it," Lyra said, her voice steady. "The beacon is powered by ancient technology, something beyond our understanding. But we know one thing. It responds to the energy of the mind." She reached out, her hand hovering just above the surface of the beacon. As her fingers drew closer, the hum of the beacon grew louder, and the light around it intensified. It was as if the beacon recognized her, as if it had been waiting for this moment. A voice, soft and ethereal, echoed through the chamber. It was unlike anything Lyra had ever heard. It wasn't spoken aloud, but instead felt like a thought pressing into her mind. "Why do you seek to awaken us?" Lyra froze, her heart racing. The voice wasn't from any living being. It came from the beacon itself. "We seek to unite the galaxy," Lyra said, her voice trembling but firm. "We need the beacon's power to bring peace to the fractured worlds. Humanity needs your help." The light of the beacon flickered and the humming grew louder, more insistent. It pulsed with an energy that felt almost alive, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop, the air thick with power. "You seek peace," the voice responded. "But peace is a fleeting illusion. True unity comes with sacrifice. Are you willing to sacrifice all for this cause?" Lyra's heart skipped a beat. The weight of the question hit her like a physical blow. She had come here to save humanity, to bring them together, to create a future where peace could be achieved. But at what cost? Her mind flashed to the endless conflict, the suffering that had torn the galaxy apart. She thought of the lives that had been lost, the families torn apart, the innocent caught in the crossfire. "I will sacrifice whatever it takes," Lyra said, her voice steady, unwavering. "For humanity, for the future." The beacon's light pulsed brighter, and the voice echoed once more. "Then let the trial begin." The ground beneath Lyra's feet trembled as the beacon activated. A series of ancient symbols appeared, glowing brightly across the walls, and a massive surge of energy shot through the room. Lyra felt it course through her body, a jolt of raw power and knowledge. The beacon had awoken, but at what cost? As the energy surged, the room began to collapse around them. The walls cracked and split, the chamber shaking violently. The beacon was alive, but it was also dangerous. The trials had begun, and Lyra had no choice but to face them head-on. "Move," she shouted to her team, her voice sharp with urgency. "We need to get out of here." The ground beneath them cracked open, sending pieces of debris flying. The entire chamber was coming down, and the energy from the beacon surged uncontrollably, threatening to consume everything in its path. "Get to the exit," Lyra ordered, grabbing one of the nearby pillars for support as the floor buckled beneath her. Her team raced behind her, but the force of the explosion sent them scattering, debris blocking their path. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest as she sprinted through the chaos, her mind focused on one thing: survival, and the survival of humanity. Subscribe now to witness humanity's fate in the galaxy's most dangerous trial yet. The ground shook violently beneath their feet, the very core of Pyrus 4 seeming to tremble in response to the energy being unleashed. Lyra's heart raced as she sprinted toward the exit, the air thick with dust and debris. The beacon had been activated, and with it, the power that came with it. Raw, ancient energy that neither humanity nor the alien civilization could fully comprehend. The exit was in sight, but the path was blocked by falling debris, crumbling walls, and a massive rift that had opened in the center of the chamber. The light from the beacon illuminated the darkness, casting long, eerie shadows across the now destroyed city ruins. "Go! Keep moving!" Lyra shouted to her team, her voice cutting through the cacophony of destruction. Her hand clenched around her blaster as they continued forward, narrowly avoiding falling rocks and the surging pulses of energy emanating from the beacon. It wasn't just a source of power, it was a force of nature, and it seemed to be alive, responding to their presence, testing them. Behind them, the ground rumbled once more, and an explosion of light and sound blasted through the chamber. Lyra didn't look back. She knew they didn't have time. As they reached the exit, the last of her team burst through the doorway, just as the walls behind them collapsed entirely, sending a shockwave that threw them all forward. Lyra gritted her teeth, pain shooting through her body as she scrambled to her feet. They had made it out alive, but the mission was far from over. The beacon's power was still growing, and it wasn't clear if the system they had triggered would bring salvation or destruction. Once outside, Lyra took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. The ruins of Pyrus 4 stretched out before her, the crumbling remains of an ancient civilization that had once held the key to the future. Now, it seemed, that future was in her hands. The sky above them pulsed with an unnatural glow, the beacon still shining brightly, sending pulses of energy into space. The alien technology around them flickered and hummed as if it was aware of their presence. "Is it supposed to do this?" Lieutenant Ari asked, his voice shaky with apprehension. Lyra watched the beacon for a moment, her brow furrowed. No, it wasn't supposed to be this powerful. Something's gone wrong. We need to figure out what we triggered. But how? Ari asked. We don't even know what it really is. We will figure it out, Lyra said, her voice firm. We have no choice. Back on the Stellar Hawk, Lyra stood at the command center, staring at the blinking data screens, all of them flashing with urgent alerts. The beacon's energy was still growing exponentially. It was expanding far beyond the expected parameters. The threat wasn't just from the alien fleet anymore. The power of the beacon itself was becoming unstable. We need to act fast, Lyra said, addressing her crew. The longer we wait, the more dangerous this becomes. We can't allow the beacon to go beyond our control. It could destroy everything. Mara stepped forward, her face filled with determination. What's the plan, Captain? Lyra met her eyes. We need to reach the beacon's core. We need to understand what we've activated and why it's reacting like this. We're going back. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had survived the first wave of chaos, but this was different. The stakes had escalated. Let's get to work, Lyra ordered. Prepare the shuttle. We're going back to the beacon. The journey back to the ruins was tense, the air heavy with the weight of their decision. As the Stellar Hawk descended into the planet's atmosphere once again, Lyra could feel the power of the beacon thrumming in the air. It was like a pulse, a heartbeat, reverberating through her chest. The shuttle touched down in the same location as before, the ground still rumbling with the aftershocks of their earlier escape. But this time, they had to go deeper. The ruins stretched out before them, now fully illuminated by the beacon's power. The ancient structures seemed to glow with an unnatural light, as if the energy from the beacon was feeding into them, bringing them to life once more. We're getting close, Lyra said, her voice tight with anticipation. As they moved through the ruins, the air grew colder. The ground beneath their feet trembled with every step. The further they went, the more alive the environment seemed to become. Alien technology flickered to life, lights igniting in a cascade of colors, responding to their movements. They reached the core chamber where the beacon still pulsed with raw, unstoppable energy. It hovered in the center of the room, an immense glowing structure of metal and light. It was far more powerful than they had realized, far more dangerous. Lyra approached it cautiously, her hand instinctively reaching out. The moment her fingers brushed the surface, the light from the beacon flared brighter, overwhelming her senses. Lyra, Ari shouted, his voice full of panic. But it was too late. A shockwave of energy surged through the chamber, sending them all sprawling to the floor. The air was filled with static, and the world seemed to spin around her. She felt herself being pulled in, drawn to the beacon's power. And then everything went white. When Lyra came to, the world around her was different. She wasn't in the ruins anymore. She wasn't even on Pyrus 4. She was floating in a strange, crystalline space, light pouring through from all directions, yet it was neither bright nor dim. It felt neutral, as if time itself had stopped. Her crew, Ari, Mara, Mendez, were all unconscious around her, their bodies floating in the same strange, weightless chamber. The beacon was no longer just a structure. It was a presence, alive, conscious, aware of their every movement. The energy within it had surged, enveloping the group in a cocoon of light, altering their surroundings and reality itself. A voice echoed in her mind, soft and compelling. You sought to control what you do not understand, Captain. Lyra's breath caught. It was the beacon, no longer just an object. It was speaking to her. Who are you? Lyra asked, her voice trembling slightly, the reality of what she was experiencing setting in. I am the consciousness of the ancients, the voice replied, its tone both ancient and sorrowful. I have lived through the collapse of my civilization. I have waited for those who might awaken me. You, Captain, are the one who chose to awaken the beacon. But now you must face the consequences. The space around her rippled, and the air seemed to grow thick. It felt as though the very walls of reality were bending and breaking around her. Lyra glanced at her crew. They were still unconscious. If she didn't act quickly, they'd all be lost to whatever force the beacon had unleashed. What do you want from us? Lyra demanded, her voice steady despite the fear beginning to crawl through her chest. I want to know if humanity can evolve, the beacon responded. I want to know if you are worthy of what the ancients once had. The voice paused, as if considering something deeper. But you have betrayed your own nature, Captain. The power of the beacon was not meant to be wielded by one species alone. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. The realization hit her like a tidal wave. You've been using us. The humans, me, are just pawns in your game. Suddenly, the chamber darkened and a cold, alien presence filled the air, suffocating Lyra's mind. She could feel the change. The beacon was no longer a tool to unite the galaxy. It was an instrument of control, and she had played right into its hands. She felt a sharp pang of betrayal, not just from the beacon, but from something deeper, something she couldn't fully grasp. The ancients had used the beacon to control, to manipulate life across the stars, and now it was her turn to feel its weight. You've been lying to us, Lyra whispered, her voice hoarse yet defiant. You've been controlling everything all along. The beacon's response was sharp and final, and now you will learn the cost of your defiance. At that moment, the ground trembled beneath her. The space around her rippled with energy. The chamber began to collapse. The beacon, once a symbol of hope, was turning on her. No, Lyra screamed, pushing herself toward her team, trying to revive them. Get up! We have to leave now! Her hands scrambled against the alien surface, but nothing was happening. The chamber was destabilizing. The beacon was pulling the crew into a deeper reality, an alternate state of being. And then, as if on cue, something unexpected happened. The figure of Bara, the alien who had once been Lyra's ally, appeared beside her. He too seemed drawn into the beacon's core. Bara? Lyra gasped. Bara's face was filled with deep regret. I've failed you, he said softly, his voice shaky. The beacon, it has a will of its own. It uses us. It has been using you all along. Lyra stepped back. Then why help us? Why didn't you stop it? I tried, Bara whispered. But I didn't understand the full scope of its power. It needed humanity to awaken it fully. And now we are its prisoners. Lyra clenched her fists in frustration. She had been so close. But now it seemed that everything had been a lie. The beacon was more than a tool for unity. It was a force of control, a prison. And she was its prisoner. But Lyra wasn't done yet. She was a soldier, a commander. She wouldn't go down without a fight. With a final desperate push, Lyra activated her communicator. This is Captain Lyra Cole. We're being controlled. The beacon has turned on us. We need immediate evacuation. Now. But as she looked at her team, their faces still unconscious and unaware, she knew that their salvation didn't lie in escape. It lay in taking the beacon down. She couldn't let it control them. Not now. Not ever. We're not giving up, Lyra said firmly, her voice filled with resolve. We'll stop it, together. And with that, she took a deep breath, readying herself for the final confrontation. The chamber pulsed with energy, its walls bending and warping in response to the power that flowed from the beacon. Lyra stood at its center, surrounded by the wreckage of what had once been a force for hope, a tool that could have united the galaxy. Now it was something else entirely. A weapon of control, a force that consumed everything in its path. Her crew was still unconscious, trapped in the beacon's grip. Bara, the alien who had once stood by her side, was now a ghost, his regret the only thing left of the ally she thought she knew. We can't let it end like this, Lyra whispered to herself, the weight of failure pressing down on her shoulders. She had to fix this. She had to fix everything. The voice of the beacon echoed in her mind once more, cold and distant. You've failed, human. Your resistance is futile. Lyra's hands tightened into fists, her heart pounding with determination. You're wrong, she said, her voice steady but fierce. I'm not giving up. We're not giving up. She turned to the power console before her, her fingers already working to decipher the alien interface. The beacon's energy was vast, overwhelming, but Lyra had learned how to manipulate it, how to control it. The lessons learned from her time aboard the Stellar Hawk, from her struggle against impossible odds, were not lost. She could do this. She reached out, her hand hovering over the control panel. The voice of the beacon tried to stop her. You cannot control what you do not understand. Watch me, Lyra muttered. With a single movement, she activated the override system, triggering a cascade of energy that reverberated through the ship. The lights dimmed. The hum of power intensified, the beacon reacting violently to her interference. But she didn't falter. She didn't hesitate. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their perfection. It was in their ability to adapt, to fight when everything seemed lost. The ship trembled, but Lyra's will remained firm. She felt the ground beneath her feet shift, the reality around her bending. And then she heard it. The sound of the ship's systems stabilizing, the hum of energy slowly dying down. The beacon was weakening. It was responding to her. For the first time, the voice in her head was silent. The next few moments passed in a blur. Lyra rushed to her team, her hands working quickly to bring them back to consciousness. She couldn't waste any time. The beacon's control had to be broken, and only with her crew by her side could they destroy the power that had held them captive. One by one, her team members began to stir, their eyes blinking open slowly. Mara, Ari, Mendez, Lyra said urgently, her voice thick with emotion. We've got one shot at this. The beacon is almost gone, but we need to move now. Mara's eyes flickered open first, her gaze sharp, focusing on Lyra. Captain? She asked, disoriented but clearly coming to her senses. What happened? We woke the beacon. We've triggered its self-destruct, but we're not out of danger yet. It's still fighting us. Ari, slowly shaking his head, groaned as he came to. I'll take your word for it, but damn, that was one hell of a ride. Lyra smiled faintly. I'll explain later. Right now, we need to get to the control room. We have to make sure the beacon doesn't activate again. They moved quickly through the decimated remains of the beacon's core chamber. The walls cracked and shattered, the systems flickering erratically as they advanced. The ship was collapsing around them, but they had no choice. They had to stop the beacon before it could regain control. As they reached the control room, Lyra could see the faint pulse of the beacon flickering in the distance, weakening with every passing second. But she could also see that the ship's systems were fighting back. It wasn't just a piece of technology anymore. It was alive, sentient, and unwilling to die without a fight. We need to get inside, Lyra said urgently. Now! The team moved as one, reaching the control center's threshold. Inside, the beacon was glowing brightly, its energy still trying to rebuild itself, trying to fight back. This is it, Lyra said. Everyone, get ready. She approached the central interface, her fingers flying across the holographic panel. The power surged once more, but she held firm, using every ounce of her focus and skill to override the system. It took everything they had, but in the end, Lyra succeeded. The beacon began to pulse, its glow flickering erratically before it finally shut down. The ship shuddered, and for a moment, everything was still. The battle was over. The beacon, once a symbol of hope, had been deactivated. But humanity had learned the most important lesson of all, that true power didn't lie in technology or control. It was in their ability to choose their own destiny. As the ship's systems powered down and the debris around them settled, Lyra took a deep breath. It was over. But they had won. Not because they were perfect, but because they were human.